Welcome to the House Blend, a Bay Area real estate podcast. I'm Nash Middleton, your host, here to bring you the latest insights, tips, and trends in the Bay Area real estate market. Each episode, we're going to dive into market updates, local stories, and expert advice from top professionals and influencers. So whether you're buying, selling, or just curious, get ready to mix it up with us. This is the House Blend. All right, so today on the House Blend, I wanted to just talk to you guys because I just finished a book that I've been reading, have read actually probably 2 or 3 times, called The Millionaire Real Estate Investor by Gary Keller. If you're not familiar with Gary Keller, he is one of the founders of Keller Williams. And he wrote this series of books called The Millionaire Real Estate Investor, another one called Hold, and another one called Flip. But for the sake of this podcast, we're going to talk about The Millionaire Real Estate Investor. Still a very relevant and powerful book in today's market. Also, this is the House Blend, and it wouldn't be an episode of the House Blend if I didn't talk to you about what I'm drinking. So this weekend, I had some friends over for coffee, went to, surprise, surprise, Highwire, got the Ethiopia single origin. It's got some blueberry, papaya, and chocolate notes to it. I made it over a pour over because it is more of a delicate blend. And that's what I'm drinking. Also, shameless plug, I'm drinking it out of a mug that I made at the Power Studio in Berkeley. So it's a very East Bay cup of coffee right here. Cheers. Thank you for tuning in. If you like what you hear, feel free to subscribe. And we're going to be talking about house hacking with my buddy Robert Ring in a coming episode. Another one of my favorite topics. But nonetheless, let's get going. So just finished The Millionaire Real Estate Agent again. And one part that really spoke to me was where Gary Keller is talking about how real estate is the most able investment. What does that mean? Well, it's kind of a pun because real estate being the most able investment goes into 8 reasons about why that is so. So it is accessible, it is appreciable, it is leverageable, it is rentable, it is improvable, deductible, stable, and livable. So he brings up some great points. Gary Keller's approach to real estate being the most able investment and how that relates to the Bay Area market that we live in. Because I feel like there's a lot of myths about real estate and how actually easy it is to buy out here. But it's also a little bit of an anomaly in the Bay Area because it's such a competitive market. And there are a lot of affluent buyers out here with a lot of money that can make it seem impossible to get into the market. Without further ado, let's just dive into it. Number one, real estate is accessible. Anybody can buy it. Real estate is a very accessible investment. You could buy it today, utilizing an FHA loan with as little as 3.5% down. It's a fallacy that you actually need 20% to buy a house. You can do it with as little as 3.5%. In some cases, if you're a vet and have access to the VA loan, you can buy it with 0%. You have to be careful with that because if you put down 0% and you finance 100% of your house, your payment is going to be high. But nonetheless, you can buy real estate. Anyone can buy it, and it is available to buy with very low down payments, which segues nicely into the next point that real estate is also leverageable. You don't need the full amount to purchase a house. You could buy a house using other people's money. Yes, interest rates are high. Yes, they're higher than they've been, and they've been going up for about 2 years now. Everyone was hopeful back in September that they were going to come down, and they started ticking down a little bit, and then they shot back up. And the reality is, not to go too deep into interest rates right now, but the reality is that the interest rate market right now is extremely volatile because there are so many factors that affect it. I think that real estate is still a good buy, especially for 5 to 7 years, and I'll go into appreciation here in a minute, but I'm pretty confident that we're going to see rates tick down over the next 8 to 12 months. And if and when you do buy a house, you could always refinance it. You can change the interest rate. What doesn't change is the loan amount. So now is actually not a terrible time. While there's a lot of uncertainty in the market, there are some great opportunities out there for somebody to get their foot in the door. Number three, it's appreciable. So one of the main reasons that people buy real estate, especially in the Bay Area, is the appreciation. Over the last 30 years, we've seen an average about 5% appreciation per year. And that's even with economic downturns. Real estate, actually, the only time that we actually saw houses go down in value was when interest rates shot up the way they did, but it held pretty stable for the most part. The reasons that home prices stayed stagnant was because of affordability. It was because of interest rates. It wasn't necessarily that the values were going down. They held their own. Some areas saw some depreciation, but that's because interest rates basically tripled, right? But generally, we'll see about 5% a year appreciation. That's with economic downturns. And if you do the math on that, if you buy $1 million house, just to keep the math simple, if you see 5% appreciation on that, that's $50,000. I also saw a fun stat come out today. According to Lance Lambert's analysis of Freddie Mac data, home prices in the U.S. have risen 490% since August 1984, which outpaced consumer inflation, which increased by 201% over the same time period. So median household income increased by 260% during that time. The states with the most significant increases in home prices over the last 40 years are often coastal states. And you got California coming in at number 4, which saw 655% appreciation over the last 40 years. Now, 40 years, that's a long time. The typical first-time home buyer is in their house for 5 to 7 years. But just to do some quick math on that, if you buy $1 million house, just to keep the numbers simple, and it increases by 5%, that's 50 grand a year that you're getting in appreciation, which is significant. And with the Bay Area being a very high demand, low inventory market, it has been categorized by that ever since I've been in real estate, and I don't see it changing anytime soon. It makes it a pretty sound investment. And that's going to segue nicely into some of the other pros of owning real estate as well. So just to recap, real estate is accessible, real estate is leverageable, real estate is appreciable. Real estate is also rentable. If you tune into this podcast regularly, you're going to hear me talk about how I love house hacking. I bought a duplex in 2021 out in Point Richmond. I rent out the bottom, and I pay about $2,000 to live in a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom out here in Point Richmond. The goal is to eventually move out, and then I'll have a $1 million asset that's just paying for itself. I got really lucky. I got a really low interest rate as I purchased in 21, and I've probably seen 5 to 10% since doing so. But I have improved the property. I have lived here for a while, and the number 5 on the list, real estate is improvable. One thing that people have to really keep in mind when they're purchasing a house in the Bay Area is that a lot of times the homes here are over 100 years old. There can be a lot of deferred maintenance. There can be older foundations. Roofs are starting to go out. You got to make sure the roof is sound. And a big challenge right now is that homes with non-tube electrical, old school electrical wiring, insurance companies, if it is not updated, will make you pay a premium. So for all of those reasons, I say it's improvable because I've improved my duplex, but at the same time, when you do buy a house, you have to go in with your eyes open. It's not like buying a tract home in Arizona where you go in and the house was brand newly built. You don't have to compete. Out here, if you walk in an open house and there's 100 people there and you write an offer and the seller is also reviewing 5 other offers and it's a competitive situation, you might give up some of that leverage to be able to do due diligence before you write an offer in order to make a competitive offer. If you have no idea what any of that means, reach out to me and I can walk you through the process of contingencies and what it looks like to purchase a house. But just know at face value, it can be really tough to get into contract on a house in the Bay Area, especially when there's multiple offers and buyers have to give up a lot of their rights to do due diligence and see what the condition of the house is um, before getting into contract. That being said, if you buy a house that needs work, real estate is improvable. Just want to come full circle on that. You can do a lot of stuff to a house to improve it. I just remodeled the kitchen. I'm super proud of that. It's probably the best 50 grand I ever spent. I also put a new deck on the property. I also put a new roof on the property. I put solar on it. I paved the driveway and a lot of the ungratifying stuff. I re-insulated the attic. We're doing floors shortly. All of that stuff is going to help increase the value of the property, which can increase my equity in the house, right? Equity is defined as the value of your house minus how much you owe on it. And every month, as I'm renting it out and the principal is going lower and lower and lower, and the property's getting improved and the value's going higher and higher, it really makes real estate a magical asset in my eyes. And that brings me right along to number 6 on my list. Real estate is deductible. It is depreciable and it is deferrable. Real estate has some of the best tax benefits, more so than any other asset class out there. So, disclaimer before I go too deep into this, talk to your CPA, consult a licensed professional when it comes to getting tax advice. But the way the tax code is written, you can actually get some amazing benefits from owning real estate. For instance, real estate is deductible. There are a million different ways that you can deduct real estate. If you're like me and you own a duplex, the IRS sees it as half of it is your primary residence, and double check with your CPA, but you get to write off the mortgage interest at the end of the year for your primary residence. In investment property, you can also write off things like repairs. If it's out of state, you can travel to that property twice a year. So if you buy a house in Hawaii, which is actually number 5 on the list with 646% appreciation over the last 40 years. But if you buy a house in Hawaii, you can travel that property twice a year to go check on your real estate. It's depreciable. So if you have an investment property, you can depreciate the structure over 27 and a half years, which offsets the income that property could generate that you have to pay tax on as well. It's also deferrable. And I'm learning is like one of the biggest rewards in real estate. If you have a property and you sell it, instead of paying capital gains tax, you can defer it. You still have to pay it, but you can actually do what's called a 1031 and defer that capital gains tax. To give you an idea of what that might look like, say I rented out my duplex and 10 years later, I'm getting, $1,000 a month in cash flow. But since renting it, tenants paid down the loan and I decide that I want to sell that property because I have $500,000 in equity and go purchase a house somewhere in the Midwest, maybe something that's a little more passive. It could do like a crowdfunding situation and basically be hands off, but get more passive income. That's possible through a 1031 exchange. If you're curious about that, feel free to reach out and we can talk more about it. Without further ado, number 7 on the list is a good point to make because the election and real estate is a pretty stable investment. I know there's a lot of uncertainty right now in the market. I know a lot of people are waiting for a crash that I don't think is going to happen, but real estate is a stable investment. It is slow to rise and it is slow to fall. There have been some factors over the last 10 years where it has been quick to rise and in some areas quick to fall, but overall over the last 30 years, real estate is a pretty stable investment. I think it's worth saying too, for all you listeners out there that think there's going to be a crash, if you look at the last 4 economic downturns, the only one where real estate was really affected was the 2008 meltdown that was actually caused by the housing market. So when I say that real estate's a stable investment, it's because it's even with economic downturns, people still need a place to live. And sure, you might not get as much appreciation some years coming out of the low interest rate environment that we have seen some slower appreciation the last few years, but overall, especially in the Bay Area, values have held their own. They've stayed pretty stagnant. And it's also worth noting, I wasn't in real estate at the time of 2008, but I've heard that where some areas of the US saw dramatic depreciation, the Bay Area didn't see that much. So I think an example I'll give, maybe in Florida, home values dropped by 50%. In the Bay Area, home values dropped by 15%. It also recovered a lot quicker out here because, I'll say this again, probably 100 more times, the market out here is so high demand, so low inventory that if you abide by the laws of supply and demand, real estate holds its own and home prices will likely continue to rise. And that is what makes real estate such a stable investment. Last but not least, number 8, my favorite, real estate is livable. You need a place to live. And if you invest correctly, if you buy in areas that are extremely dense, in areas where there are lots of jobs, low unemployment numbers, and close to public transportation, your house is not going to have an issue with people occupying it, basically, right? Because real estate is livable. You just really have to be careful about who you rent your property to, especially in the Bay Area where the tenants have a lot more leverage or rights, if you will, than landlords do. It can be really easy to rent a property out. And if that tenant decides to not pay you rent, it can be tough to get them out. Even just cause evictions have to go through the judicial process and could take up to 6 months and be expensive. So as real estate is extremely livable, you just have to be careful about who you rent your property to. I think it's worth noting that if you purchase a house and get to live there and get to improve it to your liking, there's pride of ownership that comes with real estate being livable. Owning real estate is not for everybody. Don't do it if you can't afford it. You don't want to be house poor. But the other point that I want to make on that is if you're not paying your mortgage, you're paying somebody else's mortgage. So I'm a big advocate of it, but you have to buy it when it makes sense. If it's the right point in time in your life and it's time to buy a house, then God bless you, reach out and we can make it happen. So those are the top 8 reasons that I love real estate through the words of Gary Keller and his book, The Millionaire Real Estate Agent. Highly recommend reading it. Hit me up. You can borrow my copy. There's some other amazing books that he has written as well. But I really appreciate you guys all listening, tuning in, and stay tuned for another episode coming up with my buddy Robert Ring, where we talk more about house hacking and how to build wealth in real estate by buying multifamily properties and living in one, renting out the other. Cheers.